Welcome to Office Hours. Whether you're new to the acupuncture profession or have been at it for decades, this is the place where we discuss all things Chinese medicine and more. Join Toby Daly, a seasoned acupuncturist of the Somme tradition, and Angelique Britt, a nurse turned acupuncturist who is brand new to the field, as they explore topics in and around the world of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. There's something for everyone here. Drop in anytime.
Hey, Ryan. Welcome to Office Hours. Thanks so much for coming to see us.
It's great to be here.
I wonder if we could start off, if you could give it like a little bit of background, like your professional background
Mhm.
for listeners that are in. And then if you could have that background kind of lead into how you started your amazingly named Debt by Natural Causes Substack that I'm a huge follower of. I'm a
Mhm.
subscriber. I really encourage everyone to check that out and consider subscribing. You mind giving us your
Mhm.
background and then how that led
Sure.
into your work?
Yeah. So I attended the National University of Natural Medicine, NUNM, and I graduated with my doctorate in naturopathic medicine June of 2025. Before I attended that school, I was an English teacher
Mm,
in a variety of settings. So one thing I really loved about naturopathic medicine is the emphasis on education, talking through things, thinking through things with patients, that we try to take a little bit more time. Um, and I also, previous to NUNM, I completed a master's in communication where I did a thesis project. And so I kind of, I think, came in with a little bit of a background of digging a little bit deeper, a little bit of analytical thinking. And while at NUNM, I was the student representative to the board of directors. I started getting into institutional dynamics and nonprofit governance and how everything works. Like, what are the public records that are required of a nonprofit? What's the timeline those come out in? Where are all these decisions made? While I was at NUNM, OCOM closed
mm,
suddenly, and then all those students came over to the school I was at, and they were able to finish at NUNM. They were able to basically finish their same curriculum, but at a different host institution. And I just felt like, wow, that was very fortunate that they were able to do that, because many times when schools close, students have a very hard time finishing their degree. Um, and that's something that I think about a lot with the state of acupuncture schools and programs, is that there's not a, there's not always a lot of them. Sometimes there's only a few in the state. And so if those programs close suddenly and students are in the middle of a 3 or 4 year master's degree, that's a huge burden upon them. And it really throws their lives up in the air, and people sacrifice a lot. I know I sacrificed a lot to go to graduate school, and I
mm.
think a lot of people sacrifice a lot. And I want people to understand the realities that are facing acupuncture programs and naturopathic programs, which is part of the larger reality of higher education too. And so we're seeing a lot of um, a need to balance budgets, urge institutions, or close institutions too. And one of the things that fascinates me about naturopathic and acupuncture world is that these are small schools, small programs. They can be very tight knit, and there's a very like emotional connection to
Mm,
them, which is can be really good, but it also makes it very difficult to talk about the financial realities of
mm.
what's going on in higher education today.
Yeah. How did you get over that hurdle and start to actually, bring some sunlight into that area? What was the inspiration for that?
I kind of just kept following threads.
Mm,
I had some encouragement from people when I would speak out on things. People would say, like, oh, thank you. Like, that's really valuable. A lot of this stuff kind of gets ignored by people in the status quo. I think that there's a lot of incentive to not talk about things. And like, I don't like, let's say, answers.
mm,
Like, I don't like being gaslit. Nobody does. But I don't want, that's a pretty charged term, but I don't like when people, let's say, actively pretend that the concern is not real and
Mm,
valid. So there's a little bit of a, what's the word, pushback against that. That's a motivation. And then the data is just so stark that
mm.
once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it was continually kind of like, okay, there's a big issue here. And the
Mm.
more you get into it, the bigger it becomes and snowballs.
I'm hesitant to ask this, but what's the state of Chinese medical schools in January 2026?
In distress, there's a lot of, it's not good. There's that,
Mm,
and this is part of higher education too. I kind of feel the need to emphasize that it's not totally personal towards these programs. It's not all because of like they've mismanaged things necessarily. Small privates, let's say private nonprofits or just small schools are structurally vulnerable to the changing landscape. And that's just how it is. Schools with under like 2,500 students without an endowment, that's structural fragility.
mm.
And there's a lot of reasons to view those schools as headed towards closure. So all of that was kind of before the loan caps and the earnings test. So
Do you
that's
mind talking
been,
about that a little bit in detail? I think people may
yeah,
not
yeah.
be really familiar.
Yeah, the loan caps and the earnings test are part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and the loan caps will begin in July. So there will be no more Grad Plus loans for living expenses. Essentially, up to this point, we've had unlimited borrowing potential from borrowers. One thing that I realized in researching all of this is that, wow, all of this whole sector of education, a large part of graduate school education too, is all supported by federal student loans. And the problem is that when you look at the data, it looks like in alternative medicine, those loans aren't being paid back. And so I think it's legitimate for the federal government to say, hey, what are we doing here? It's a very short time frame, right? It's very sudden to cut off Grad Plus loans, and they're also going to limit um, professional degrees to 200,000 total for the program, and then master's degrees are limited, or other graduate degrees. The master's degrees or like academic doctoral degrees are limited at 100,000,
Mm,
but that is also 20,500 per year. So really, it's less than 100,000
mm,
for most people. And then there's the whole question of will which degrees get the 200K cap? Because that's really important. It's
mm.
like double the money, the potential loan money. And currently it looks like it's going to be very narrowly defined, but we're going to get that proposed rule soon. And so both acupuncture and the naturopathic organizations and um, a lot of other professional organizations, right? Physical therapy, nurse practitioner, occupational therapy, physician assistant, right? They're all going to try to get the 200K
Mm,
cap. So again, we're all kind of in this larger trend that's going, this
mm.
larger direction that makes higher education really difficult, especially at small schools. So that's an issue. And we can go through some visuals of what happens when cost of the degree is far over 200,000,
Right.
right? How do you do that? Even if you can bring the tuition down, which means that you're cutting tuition revenue at a small school. So, okay, maybe you can bring that down and leave a little bit of room for borrowing for living expenses. It's very difficult to see how people, live and survive
Mm,
through a 3 or 4 year degree. Maybe you can get a part-time job or a full-time job. That's again very difficult. We all know that I think graduate school is stressful. You're trying to pass tests. So if you're working a job, it's kind of almost it can be counterproductive, right? You're spending all your time at your job, but you should be studying to pass the
yeah.
tests that you paid a bunch of money
Right.
to take. So that's the loan cap. So then
Well,
now we're
just
getting
pause on that just for a sec. So, what do you think? it seems like Chinese medical schools, maybe naturopathic schools too, will have a hard time making the case that they're eligible for 200,000 when
Mm.
they people haven't been able to pay back their loans, right? Is that
Yeah.
hamper their ability to say, oh, definitely give us more money?
Yeah, I think so. I think that part of this is saying, oh, they're picking on us, but the rules were kind of developed to stop what's going on in alternative medicine programs, like financially, like we're kind of the worst offenders. And so if the rules mean anything, they are going to be applied
What
to
do you mean that we're the
us.
worst offenders? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll show you in one of the visuals that, well, a couple of visuals is that alternative medicine programs have some of the worst debt to earnings ratios
Mm,
in the United States. It's predicted that 98% of students are um, in alternative medicine master's degrees that will fail the earnings test. So it's very obvious and stark. Now we don't know, maybe things will be delayed. Maybe Congress will pass a new law because there'll be such a big outcry of like, stop, this is going to affect like way too many people. But it doesn't get around the actual like earnings that are reported to the IRS and the median debt load of students. So I think that's again in the talk of all this advocacy and like we got to, and yes, we do have to do this. Like the schools need the naturopathic schools need the 2K cap. That's existential. They
mhm.
absolutely need that. It would not work with 100,000
Yeah.
loan cap. I just don't see it working. So there's like we're kind of putting out one fire at a time. So need to get the 200K cap. I'm not sure about like a doctorate in acupuncture if that would also be get the 200K cap. So there's that issue, but then there's also the earnings test issue, which will look and say like what's the earnings that people are reporting? And then for a graduate degree, you compare that to a bachelor's degree. And that's where a lot of the programs don't meet that threshold for earnings. And that's where that I think that 98% of students are in failing
Mm.
programs.
See.
Let me just say, make sure I
Yeah.
get that right. So, uh, since you've taken a master's degree program, you should have an earnings bump up, right? But if you
Yeah.
don't show an earnings bump up, then it's saying that the degree
Right.
is not worth having loans. Is that right?
Yeah. And for like bachelor's degrees, they compare it to a high school diploma.
Uh-huh.
And then for master's or doctoral degrees, they compare it to a bachelor's degree. So it's pretty reasonable, if you go to school for 4 years and the federal government gives you all this loan money, yes, you should make more than somebody who just did a bachelor's degree. Now we can get into, okay, there's jobs in society that we want that don't make a lot of money. And so, and I agree with that. And I think that education should be widely available and affordable. But at the same time, I can, in a way, understand the logic behind the earnings test. And you could argue that once you constrain the supply, then the earnings will go up because
Right.
there'll be less people with a degree.
Yeah, but yeah, that's true. If we were talking about like mufflers or something, I think that would be good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
healthcare, right? That makes it extra tough.
The demand is there, right? Of course, and we need
Yeah,
more supply, but also we need to be compensated in a way that makes like a middle class life
right.
possible.
So that there's like multiple problems going on then, right?
Yes.
Students going in, they have no idea that there's a 2% chance of them paying back out their loan, right? Is that right? I forgot.
Uh, uh,
98%. Oh, that the loan. Can you tell me that 98% again, please?
so this was from the Department of Education when they're talking about the earnings test, figuring out how do we want to language this in the rules. So most common master's degree programs that fail. I didn't put in that little comment with the red line. This is all original. 8% of Title IV students in master's degree programs in alternative and complementary medicine fail the proposed rule. So, right, only 2% of students are in programs that result in earnings over this bachelor's degree threshold.
That's almost shocking. I feel like I want to just pause there for a sec. So people are taking on these gigantic loans, and then
Mhm.
putting 3 to 4 years of their life aside, and then they're not get 98% of them are not going to make any more money than they would have if they had not gone to that program, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then you're talking about, right, the time, the opportunity
Yeah.
cost. You're talking about the burden of the debt now, so you're not gonna be able to get a car loan, a home loan. You're gonna, be kind of figuring out different ways, like, do I file jointly? Do I file separately with my
Mhm.
partner, right, to present my income in the way that will get me kind of the lowest loan payment. But it's the test is meant to address the problem that exists in alternative medicine graduate degrees. Like, if any rule that gets at this issue would affect us. And I
Yeah.
think that's the uncomfortable truth is like, because we're trying to, a lot of people want to try and like advocate and kind of like survive this path and then survive this and then survive this. And it's like, hey, like we actually have a serious issue here. It's been an issue for the past 2 decades. I don't think there's ever been an alternative medicine sector of employment that would support the debt level
Mm.
of the graduate degrees. And that's actually the problem. And if we can just face that, then maybe we can start talking about solutions to that. But if we're just trying to keep the debt money flowing, and if we're just like, what's going to happen to the schools? We have to equally say what's happening to alumni from these programs and what's going to happen to the students coming into these programs. And the earnings test is also called the do no harm earnings test, which is pretty aptly named. And I think that those of us in alternative healthcare should really sit with that. That are we doing a lot of harm by watching this cycle of debt continue?
So to be
So,
just to be
oh, go ahead.
clear, so what you're saying through all of this from these statistics is that essentially those of us that have gone to alternative medicine schools and that have incurred debt, 98% of us won't be able to earn enough to sufficiently pay them back
It's unlikely you'll make more than people with bachelor's degrees.
across any field. Like, are we talking like, is it an apples to apples comparison, like healthcare bachelors to healthcare masters?
Right. There's different ways that they establish that bachelor's degree threshold. There's a whole formula, and sometimes they use the same field, bachelor's degrees in the same field, and then sometimes they use just like bachelor's degree in the state that the school is located in. So
Mm.
there's several different ways of establishing what's the actual bachelor's degree threshold, but it's likely you won't make more than a bachelor's degree holder. That's the thing is like I kind of like the debt to earnings comparison when we get into this, which was part of the previous like Biden administration accountability metrics, but that's now gone away. But you could say, well, there's a lot of debt, but your earnings are high. Or you could say, yeah, you're not making more than a bachelor's degree, but the debt's actually not that high. And then you can also get into issues of a lot of healthcare professionals in other fields don't pay off their debt. They go and work for the government or they go and work for a nonprofit and they do 10 years of qualifying payments and they do public service loan forgiveness. And I think that's a really key thing to look at because this is the big thing we missed in alternative medicine is that we should have been building a public service loan forgiveness pipeline because then we would be doing similar loan forgiveness as all other healthcare professionals. But we don't have that. Unfortunately, the biggest nonprofits are the schools themselves. And so everybody who's working for the school is getting public service loan forgiveness qualifying payments, but very few graduates are because most graduates go into private
Mm.
practice. So this is one of the things where it's a real tragedy. If we had keyed into this 10 years ago, then we could have been incubating all these nonprofit clinics and showing people how to make those work and how to make those viable. And those could have then been hiring new graduates as they came out. You can imagine a scenario where somebody graduates, they work for 2 years at a nonprofit in a residency type of arrangement. They decide if they like it, if they don't like it. But either way, you've got 2 out of your 10 years under your belt. And then then there's hope, right? Then there's a plan. You're 20% done. You can plan that out. But if you're just in private practice making less than you would have made with a bachelor's degree and the interest is capitalizing on your loan principal, it's just like it's just hopeless. I mean, that's why people just kind of zone out and disassociate from it and say, well, I'm just going to make 25 payments on income-based repayment. And then unfortunately, you get hit with the tax bomb on if you get it canceled with income-based repayment, then you have to pay taxes on that amount. So you're going to get a huge tax bill from the
Mhm.
IRS.
You think, Ryan, like thinking about it like in a different way, I thought, wow, it's amazing that the schools are closing, but it's probably safer to say it's amazing that the schools ever got started in the first place.
Yes, I think that there was a sort of loophole
Mm.
that a lot of graduate degrees took advantage of through the, I think, 90s and early 2000s, right? Enrollment kept going up, and the message was like, education is good. This is a good thing, and it's worth it. You're going to pay it back. And all of that has kind of been flipped
Yeah.
on its head now. And everybody's saying, like, hey, is this worth it? Like, why shouldn't I go do an apprenticeship in a trade? Right? Instead of spending 4 years for a bachelor's degree and then more after that. I do think it is kind of weird to me, amazing to me that it's lasted this long, because it's so bad. The
Mm.
situation is truly, truly bad when you look at the data. And it's a great, I think, question of group dynamics and governance and incapacity to speak about things, inconvenient truths.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's capitalism, and right, we don't speak openly about a lot of things in
Yeah.
society.
You think like maybe the students' just aspiration to help people with Chinese medicine just covered up that clear black and white. Mm.
Yes.
And the schools
Yeah.
didn't help, right? Because the schools, it's not in their interest to say, "Oh, wow, this
Right.
this looks really bad for you guys. Are you sure you want to do
You sure
this?"
you wanna do
There's no incentive for the school to say that, right?
No.
Even though they know they have the numbers in front of them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's delving into another whole aspect of this, which is kind of informed consent and misrepresentation through omission. So, if a school has data, from an alumni survey, so they know roughly the median net income of their graduates, shouldn't they then share that with prospective students? Isn't that important information that someone would use to
Mhm.
make a consequential financial decision? I think it is. And you also get into this issue of accreditation that the accreditors are kind of putting the stamp of approval. When you're accredited, then you can accept federal student
Mm.
loans. So that's the gateway. So then it's like, well, what have the accreditors been doing all of this time? Because it feels like the quality control did not include talking about the realistic career outcomes, let's say, of these degrees, which is kind of crazy, right? Because it's just like, why are we doing this in the first place, right? Education's supposed to result in a better situation for people. But I think it did rely a lot on idealistic people who wanted to help others and who felt like they were getting plugged into, let's say, a niche lineage that would then provide a kind of identity some guidance and some mentorship, which can be really valuable things. But the problem is, like, when you pair it with financial toxicity, it becomes something else. My view is that alternative medicine's like amazing and wonderful, but it's in this corrupted container and the container's falling apart. So how do we salvage what's good?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm turning that on you, Ryan. How do we
That's
salvage
right. Let us
what's
know how to
good?
do it.
We got to
What's
do it
it?
together.
We have this sinking ship, and with lots of holes in it. We'd like to know what do we need to do, Ryan? Go.
Well, we can have conversations like this to
Mhm.
begin with. We can have gatherings and forums and um, uh, talk with people about what we can realistically salvage from all of this.
Mm.
I think the doctoral programs are a lost cause. Without the debt money, who's going to pay for that training? You would have to have familial wealth to
Mm.
fund, like 4 years of that number of credits and 4 years of education and all of that. So I guess maybe it could exist as like a tiny private school with very few people. But as far as like at scale, I don't think the doctoral degrees are the future. I think probably like a licensure pathway is realistic.
Mm,
So basically go back to licensed acupuncturist, right? Instead of all this extra and then you do continuing ed training. Maybe you can
yeah.
modularly add stuff on.
But even the
Uh,
master's degree is in trouble, right? Even those schools that are offering the master's degree, they might not exist, right?
yeah, I think the timeline is currently, as things stand, the earnings test results happen July 2027. That's when everybody gets notified that they passed or failed
Mm,
officially the earnings
mm.
test. And I'll show you another graphic on the Substack that was very important and impactful, I think, to people. So the Department of Education released a new data set that basically had the earnings and the thresholds. And this was for prediction purposes. And this is, I think, where you get the 98% of students in failing programs. But I narrowed down that data set and put it in kind of an easily to view format. And so you can see that almost all of the master's degree programs that had data are the median earnings are under the threshold.
I'm looking at it right now by a huge margin, right?
Yeah, so you've got AIMC there, master's level, median earnings 41K, earnings threshold 61K.
But that's not even close to getting there.
Right. So it's
Okay.
definitely looking like a fail for a lot of
Yeah.
schools. And the problem is that you can't really do anything to change this because this is all 4 years after graduation.
Mm.
So they're going to take the earnings from 2025, and those are people that graduated 4 years previous to that, around there. And so they're going to look at their IRS filings and calculate the median earnings. And then they're going to compare that to the bachelor's degree threshold. And then they'll say, okay, you pass or fail in July 2027.
Mm.
They're telling the
So,
school that they pass or fail.
right, they're telling the school that, but then if the school fails, they must notify all current and prospective students.
I see. Is there any
So,
school doing well? I mean, this looks abysmal.
let's see. We can call that. Okay, so
Brian, is there any school that's doing close?
let's,
That's too high doing well because
yeah.
these numbers are
What's your
bad.
school, Angelique? I
Oh,
think
I
your
went to the
school's
New
on.
England School of Acupuncture, and then
Oh,
I did
okay.
a doctoral program through Taoist traditions. So I see Taoist traditions on
Okay,
there.
you can see their master's
Yikes.
degree is far below. Let's see, is anybody, okay, so, oh, EDP, University of Puerto Rico, not familiar with that school. That's probably a different sort of
They're
alternative
dead
medicine.
even though. It's not like they're thriving there, Ryan. They're dead even.
Yes, they're right there.
It's under MCPHS. MCPHS absorbed New England School of Acupuncture. So I bet that's
Oh,
the
that's
one.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
So
no.
45K versus 62K, not really close for the master's
Mm.
degree. Let's see. So Sonoran did their first professional degree. So their ND degree did, under this measurement, did 61K versus 57K. So they might pass.
And that's for
I've
naturopathic
never,
doctor, not acupuncture.
Right.
Okay.
I never heard of that school too, Ryan.
Me
Do
either.
you know anything? What is there a secret sauce in that school or something?
Sonoran, yeah, I don't know. It looks like they're somehow their graduates have the training, the business training to like make a private practice, I think, profitable. I should say that there's another listings for Sonoran because they used to be classified at 5112, which was underneath medical, and then they switched into this other code. And their previous coding, that cohort did fail the earnings test.
Mm.
So remains to be seen, right? Because you could have a few like a group of high earners that kind of pulls the median up
Right.
during that cohort measurement. But the next one's going to be like 2025 earnings from people that graduated 4 years prior.
So
Okay.
from our
So
quick scan here, it does not look like any of the acupuncture schools made it. Is that
Right.
incorrect?
None of the ones in the Department of Education's data
Yikes.
passed. You can see St. Catherine, that's a master's degree in alternative health. That's some other alternative health degree. So
That's not good at all.
that's not good. And so what that means is you fail July 2027, all the students get notified. So if
Mhm.
I'm a prospective student, I'm thinking, whoa, do I want to start a 3-year commitment here? And at that point, the schools will be able, it looks like these rules aren't final, but this is in the draft rules. The schools can choose a teach out, a voluntary teach out. They have 120 days to choose.
What is that? What's a
And what
voluntary
that
teach
can
out?
do, yeah, what that can do is that can preserve loan access for the students who are already enrolled.
Okay.
Because if you don't do that and you fail again in July 2028, which it looks, they're so far off, it looks like they're going to fail in 2027 and 2028. If you fail 2 times out of any 3 consecutive years, then the program itself gets cut off for loan.
Even if it's seated, even if it's in the middle of another university, like New England School of Acupuncture, for example, even though if it's part of
Right.
NCPHS,
Right. This is programmatic accountability.
so it'll just get
Yeah.
closed. Like goodbye.
Well, you don't have access to loans.
So you have to go
So
privately.
students can, right, take out a private loan or pay for it. So I like to think that the schools will choose the teach out option in order to ensure that the current students can actually take out loans to finish. And then you get
Mhm.
like 1 or 2 years to finish no new students can come in,
Okay.
and then you just finish it out. So that's how I think about the timeline that we're on. This is after the loan caps also. So first you got to survive the loan caps, then you got to survive the earnings test.
So it's a 1-2, right? And
Yeah.
Chinese medical schools look for both.
Right. Yeah, it's not looking good. And
Right.
the only thing I can see that can change it is advocating, somehow getting the rules changed or delayed,
Mm,
or like doing a lawsuit,
mm.
like a class action lawsuit with like a big group of schools to say, hey, like, stop, you got to delay this because it's going to harm us. We don't think
The
it's legal.
root problem's still there.
Right.
Chinese medicine education is too expensive compared to reimbursement later on.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Yes.
that's what so that
Yeah.
may be a stopgap to keep this system that's not working well going longer.
Right. To benefit who is my question. I understand it benefits the employees of the schools because that's their paycheck. But knowing what we know, would we really recommend somebody entering into this? I
Be
wouldn't.
yeah, before reading your Substack, I would say, yes, it's a great profession. Again, I graduated in the sweet spot at
Mm,
2002, right? I feel like
mm,
that was, again, it was great education, wasn't crazy expensive, easy
yeah.
payoff and things like that. Until starting to read your work, I just thought, well, everything's going similar to then how I left it. But I was
Mm,
shocked to see, these numbers like you're showing us, right? It's
yeah.
it's it's really sobering.
Yeah. It's hard because it can be very fulfilling work. We're helping a lot of people. It has an identity, emotional aspect to it also. But I don't think it's right for people who are kind of already in the in group with kind of grandfathered status and like these privileges that have accrued over time. I don't think it's right to ignore the reality today for students. And I think that there are ways, there's possibilities, right? You can imagine possibilities, but they take a ton of work because you're going to have to get legislative changes. You're going to have to work out how to standardize testing work for a different type of credential. The people who work at the schools of the future, right? I don't think they're going to be getting paid 200,000 or 150. I think that needs to come back into alignment with the earnings that most of the professionals in the sector are, making.
Is that right? I mean, you have data on that, showing people that work in the schools make 150 to 200K a year?
Yeah, I mean, the audits that I look at,
Uh-huh.
yeah, which is not like totally out of line for higher ed or let's say larger corporations, but that's the problem. It's like you kind of can't have it both ways, right? You can't
Right.
say like this is a heartfelt, idealistic, mission-driven, purpose-driven group, tribe, and then say, but it's administered and governed in just like all these other higher ed and corporate settings.
Right.
Right. And I had a lot of problems with with things I saw at my school
Mhm.
that I thought was like, this is not aligned with our values and this doesn't make sense, which is when you sort of run up against we're operating within capitalism and we can no longer pretend that that works or that is in line with our values of do no harm, education, open discussion, let's say democratic governance of things. So there's so many intersecting issues going
Mhm.
on here that it's kind of overwhelming, but it's fun to be engaged in. And I should have said this up front, but I'm on the board of Poca Tech, the
Mm.
other acupuncture school in Oregon, and they're graduating people with under 25,000 in debt. So they're graduating licensed acupuncturists for under 25K.
I know that's a small school though, right?
Yeah. Mm. And it's
What's
community acupuncture.
yeah, what's their cohort? Do you know?
Like 15.
So that's one avenue, right? That's gonna looks like it will survive this, right? Because they don't take loans, right?
Right. They don't do
They're
federal
immune to
loans.
this.
Yeah.
Everyone's really depressed now with liver cheese stagnation, Ryan. So look forward a little bit ahead and help people that have listened this far. So going forward in the future, a boutique school like that, you think that would be good? And then, like you mentioned before, really robust school that does herbs and everything like that, maybe a pipeline for loan forgiveness or something like that, because we want to incentivize those people to come into we need to educate them. We want to incentivize them to do that work with a loan forgiveness, public work thing. You think
Yeah.
maybe like that's two possible, it's pretty dark, Ryan. So two
Yeah.
possible pinpoint light things, a
Yeah.
Pocatech model and a public loan forgiveness kind of model.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are the two main things. So the Poca Tech is connected with working class acupuncture. So that's which is a several nonprofit clinics. It's a nonprofit that operates several clinics. Employees of these nonprofits are getting PSLF qualifying payments,
Mm.
while at the same time they are actively working to create a model that stops that student debt problem. So
Okay.
that's, I think, a great pathway to pursue. The thing is, like, that involves legislative, structures, and those people don't get paid very much, the people who work at those nonprofits. So I think partially is that we need to sort of decide where we're located, because we really can't do the, let's say, middle class professional 70 to 100K, stable jobs in the schools. There's no funding left for that. There's a couple years of funding. Here's what I'm afraid of. I think we're going to like waste the remaining funding trying to save the sinking ship that
Mhm.
can't
Mhm.
be saved, rather than what I hope will happen is that everybody sees the writing on the wall, does a dignified teach out, graduates all the current students, sells all the assets or the extra assets, and then says, all right, now we can change our mission or we can donate the leftover assets to a different nonprofit that has the same mission of educating, let's say, acupuncturists or naturopaths. So you can either mutate or you can kind of close one and sort of bridge the funding into another one. But I think what's going to happen is that the status quo will try to preserve itself as long as possible.
It seems like this is like five alarm fire, and it
Yeah,
seems
yeah.
weird to say, well, let's just stay in the house. Let's just stay in the
Yeah,
house.
yeah. I know. For those of us who aren't, getting 70 to 100K per year
Yeah,
from the burning house, then it's like, stop. What are you doing? But when
right.
you're in it and saying like, I don't want to have to go, look for a job and start a private practice, like you want to kind of go. It's easy to look the other way. So that's what I think that's what this next 6 months is about. And once we get the final rules, it's kind of saying, hey, look, like the earnings test is going to happen in this way. But yeah, even then, though, you can probably rationalize it, right? It's like, well, there's going to be a lawsuit, and like we don't know for sure yet.
Mm.
But that's where the consumer protection piece comes in, is you know making sure prospective students have access to this information because they're the ones putting their lives and their careers on the line.
Right.
Mhm.
They're the ones taking the risk. They're the ones providing the debt. If there's no students, then there's no debt money also. And enrollment was going down before all of this anyway. Yeah, it's just really important to have open discussion about the numbers because, and I'll show you one more slide here.
I'm not sure if we can take it,
I
Ryan.
was going to say, I don't know if I can handle one more
Oh,
slide,
yeah,
Ryan.
this is supposed to be the
Okay.
upswing.
Oh, this is the upswing part? Okay. It's better
No,
be
this
one
isn't.
big smiley, happy face, Ryan. That's all I can.
I have rainbows. I need rainbows.
Sorry, it's not rainbows.
Okay.
Okay.
If you're a prospective student, head to the Substack, check out the sheet, the spreadsheet that I keep is kind of some basic information about the schools. You can see if they have some red flags, like a low financial responsibility composite score, or if they're on heightened cash monitoring.
Can you tell us what those mean?
Well, the financial responsibility composite score is a calculation with numerous factors, and if you get below 1, then you get flagged by the Department of Education.
Like
And
AMC is there on your slide is
let's
point
see.
0.9.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get put on the heightened cash monitoring list, meaning you have to do some things that prove you're not going to close suddenly and take a bunch of student loan money with you or use it all up. So there's that aspect, and then there's the earnings list. So sorry, that is my hopeful thing is like be informed. For the schools, like sorry, you're probably cooked, but
Okay.
for people who are interested in alternative medicine, like you can educate yourself, protect yourself, and find and ask about these issues, right? When you go say like, what data can you share with me about the earnings of your graduates and the median debt? And if the school's kind of like, we don't know.
But no school can say positive things in that area, right?
Not
Uh,
court, no.
yeah,
No, but so no
I-
school
none
could
that we can
say
see.
no school can say to just make sure I have this right, Ryan. So school can say if you come here for 3 or 4 years, taking this incredible amount of debt, you're gonna be able to make more money than you would otherwise. No school can say that, right?
Probably they would, I don't know what they would be basing that on. They might say that like anecdotally, which is why it's important that we have median numbers. Because
Mhm.
anecdotally, you can say, like, look, this person's here's a graduate, here's an alumni, they're successful. They started this successful herb company, they started this product, right? It's like, well, yeah, but you have no way of knowing if that person, you don't know their debt load. You don't know if their family supported them. You don't know if their partner has a corporate job that provides health benefits. Like,
Right.
you really need to look at the median earnings and the median debt and have people chew on that and compare it to their own situation. Yeah.
Right.
And the great thing is, once this becomes common knowledge and people are doing that, then the resources and the energy will start shifting into sustainable
Mhm.
models. So I don't think you can get to the happy place without going through the data filter.
Okay, Ryan, but that was 2 sentences of happy things and an hour of darkness, so that's good. No,
Yeah.
but I think this is why we wanted to have you on, right? Angelique and I have been so looking forward to this, right? Because we wanted to know. We really wanted to rip this Band-Aid off,
Mm,
and you're the only one I know that's ripping this Band-Aid off, so we really
mm,
appreciate you taking your time to show us. So we've ripped the Band-Aid off. Now
yeah.
we've got to figure out what we want to put on that wound. It's time to get creative, I guess, because the field's open for how to fix this, right? Again,
Mm.
naturopathic schools, Chinese medical schools, these are so valuable, but they're rotten.
Well, yeah, I mean, currently, yeah, it's not sustainable, and it's I think gotten caught up in this student debt crisis, and it's yeah, it's unfortunately one of the worst examples of the student debt issue in the United States. So
Mhm.
yeah, we don't. Who knew? Like, who knew we would land right in it? But here we are.
The naturopathic schools and Chinese medical schools finally exceptional in one thing, but that we didn't want to be. That's too bad.
That's fun.
The
Uh,
example. Yeah.
yeah, so example, but yeah, how not to manage a school.
Yeah, sort of. There definitely are a lot of things that could be changed, but like now is the time to do those things, right? Like now is the time to make a lot of changes so that you can do a 2-year teach out. So that's kind of the contingency planning of asking like, okay, wait, how much money would we need for a 2-year teach out if we weren't accepting new students for
Right.
those 2 years? But that needs to be happening now. And so anybody listening to this, you can start talking about it in your professional state association. You can talk to it about alumni. You can ask your school and you can start imagining, asking, looking for other models, looking for sustainable models.
All right.
It
Angelique,
sounds so
oh,
much
go
like
ahead.
the death of our profession. Like, I'm just listening, like looking at
Yeah.
those numbers and looking at how terribly acupuncture schools are doing financially for those of us that went to school, and that's all of us basically, is just like, goodness gracious, I mean,
Mm,
it just feels just acknowledging like the dark hole of sadness in my chest at this moment.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So
It's hard.
so when we learn CPR, it's like we have to start to delegate, like, you call 911 and you get the AED. So like who do we point at to be like, you need to decide? Is it the deans of the school? Like at the lowest level, like is it the deans of the school? It's the presidents of the colleges. Like who do we talk to? Like the students, I know several students who are still in acupuncture school who when they hear this are gonna die. Like how do we mobilize?
I think, I mean, if you're currently in the school, like you'll probably, be able to finish as far as because the earnings test happens July 2027. Um, Now that still means like every student should be asking about like the financial health of the school in the near
Mhm.
term, right? So yes, there's those forums. I think the state associations are really important. I don't think it's fair to rely on, students to spark a change,
Mm.
right? I think it needs to be people who are already have the license, have the credential, and are saying, we want something to continue. We want this to continue in one form or another. And if, like when your school says like, hey, can you give us some money? Then alumni can say, how are you viewing the earnings test? To ask those specific questions and really push for um a specific answer. And I think that state associations need to start taking collective action, as in writing open letters and having the entire board sign them, as in
Schools?
the state associations, right?
Yeah,
I
and
think
the
they should
schools.
be writing to the schools, their local school, and the was it CCAHM, the acupuncture, the group that all the schools are a part of, the
Yeah.
national
Yeah.
school group. So yeah, because here's my thing. What I think is that like we're about like we need to be. This needs to be public, right? All of this data is now public, and there's going to be more data with the earnings test because the Department of Education is going to make this whole website. And it's going to show all of this information: median earnings, median debt, time it takes to graduate, So it's all going to be public soon enough. And so these are public issues that affect a large number of people. And somehow those of us who already have the licensure and want it to kind of continue because we value it, I think that we need to band together and make clear demands. And I think that'll go a long way
Ryan,
pushing for something.
this making demands, it seems a little bit like, so you're saying get some lifeboats going off this ship.
Yeah, or I would say like we're all getting in the lifeboat
Yeah.
and you can join us, but we're not going to stay here. We're not going to keep acting like this is normal and like everything's fine. Yeah.
Right. We're going to look at the walls of the house and say, that's on fire.
Yeah.
We got to get out of here. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's really sobering to think about, and but again, hopefully there's opportunity, right? Because the
Mm.
root was sick, right,
Yeah.
of this education. So now we got to we got to just abandon this, plant a new root. So again, these are so valuable. Naturopathic medicine, Chinese medicine, so valuable. So
Mhm.
we've got to do other things. It's cool
I
that we
think
have
so.
Poca Tech is like they figured a way to do it without taking federal loans. I mean, that's
Hmm.
amazing. That must be so much incredibly hard work to be able to do something like that. But
Hmm.
at least we have one example of how to do this rather than
Hmm.
just starting from scratch, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's examples for naturopathic medicine too. Some states, the privileges differ between states. So you can have a right-sized credential where the cost of the training makes sense relative to the earning potential of the services that most people offer.
That sounds so reasonable. What you just said sounds so
Yes.
reasonable. It's
Well, yeah.
amazing that that's not the standard.
I don't know. Yeah, right, right. Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of like heartfelt, there's a lot of ideological priors that come into it, right? In terms of like this school, this school can't close, or this means like the death of the whole project. And I don't see it that way. A lot of schools are going to close just in general, over the next few years. There'll be mergers, consolidations, but just because your alma mater closes, it doesn't mean that there's no way to get acupuncture to more people.
But it is going to be through something new, right?
I think so.
This model is just 100% not going to work. So it's going to have to be through something new.
I think so. Yeah. I think the current model has been funded through unpayable student debt for the past 20 years.
I,
So, and it's been ballooning, right? The cost has just gone up
right.
and up and up, and the cost of living goes up and up and up.
I heard
It's
about
just
this,
not
right?
been.
It's you take on MD level amount of debt and then get like a hair salon salary.
That's
That's just
right.
not going to work, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's continued also in that way because that conversation has not been given any seat at the table. And I think it's been repressed and
Yeah.
pushed down and pushed into a lot of private conversations. And that's why I say, like, this has to be, there has to be a public element of this change. And I would encourage people who are involved in the organizations and leadership to not make all these decisions behind closed doors and
Mm,
to say, like, well, we're the leadership group, so we decided this is what we're doing. Everybody get behind us, and we're done talking about this. It's like we need open forums where people get to speak their mind and their piece and submit data for everybody to look at.
mm.
There has to be, I think, a democratic conversation about all of it, as opposed to like, good news, this nonprofit board decided. So here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, but it's definitely a time for fresh ideas, right? So
Right. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that makes sense, right? To try and open the aperture as wide as possible and take in some fresh ideas.
Yeah. I think so. I think it's a great way to say it. Yeah.
Right, Angelique, ask Ryan one final question and then try and elicit something positive out of him.
No pressure. I guess like when you can look forward, let's say that people listen and let's say that they do, the 2-year plan of educating the current students and then deciding it's time to really go in a new direction. Like, what do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years for both acupuncture and I guess, the complementary and alternative medicines, integrative medicines in general?
The hopeful scenario for
Yeah.
me,
Yes, for once, Ryan.
that there would be these small nonprofit schools so it'd just be, let's say, like one building, like a house, and it would be authorized by the relevant state board to teach. The hours taught there would count towards the state licensure. And so you would have something like a, 2-year modular program that students could take while working part time, or they could kind of do a little and then leave and then come back. And then those hours would count towards getting a license in that state. And it would be something like, yeah, cohorts of like 20 people. And there'd be like, the faculty that's probably like teaching part time and it was more of a passion project for them. because they wanted to get this information out there, and there would be, you know, a couple administrative people who didn't get paid very much, but it was enough to live, getting paid a living wage. And then those graduates would be working at and starting nonprofits. So there would be a sort of nonprofit incubator aspect. And the people who had already done that would come back to tell the current students about that and say, this is
Mhm.
how I did it. You can come and work for us, or you can, if you want to start a new nonprofit with a different mission, like we'll help you. And you guys should all be on the boards of all these other nonprofits that are doing this work. And then all the previous generation of graduates with the doctoral degrees and their master's degrees would be teaching at that school and then working at those nonprofits too on the way to their public service loan forgiveness payments. So that's the kind of sustainable type of system that I can imagine. But it takes a lot of work to set up and to wade through, to create.
Yeah, but it sounds like maybe this is how Chinese medicine school started initially, like passion
Right.
projects, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's like it's run its course. So now it's got to be like next generation's got to step up.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think it just kind of took a couple wrong turns and really got pulled into the money and the credential and the status project. And once it's hard because once that status quo is funded, then all the funding just goes into continuing it and maintaining it. So there's no like fund for innovation that I know of.
Yeah, you need somebody really against the grain like Pocatec to say, I'm not going to take that money and I'm going to figure something out.
Right.
One school, right? I think that's only maybe middle way
Middle
also.
way also,
Yeah.
right, doesn't take federal student loans. But the tuition at Pocatec, the 12K, is based off of how much a new practitioner can make in their first year.
But that's not mandated by the government. That's just common sense.
Yeah, and
Okay.
because they're committed to not exploiting students. And that's the piece that has been missed, is that I think that the institutions have ignored the outcomes for students for so long that it just kept building up. And now there's this government kind of hammer coming down.
This hit me in the gut earlier when you said, yeah, do no harm. Obviously, that I feel that cellularly. And then, yeah, the
Yeah.
fact that we didn't do that to the students,
Yeah,
that makes me a
it's
little
hard.
ill. Mm.
Yeah, it's hard, and you can see why people don't want to talk about it
Yeah.
openly. It's really uncomfortable.
Very
But
But,
so glad that you did.
yeah, that's what we're so appreciative of. Yeah, you spearheading this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I don't know who does this, right? I guess we just wait for the government numbers to come out, but you were on this so early and you've been putting so much sunlight on this so early. So, yeah, we really appreciate you, all that hard work you've been doing there, all
Thank
this
you.
time you set aside to talk to us today, right? It's just really valuable for the Chinese medicine communities. Keep up the good work. Everyone should really subscribe to his Substack too.
Yeah.
He's on it and yeah, clear, transparent, and then his understanding of it, right? And then we're really going to need that kind of guidance going forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And it's going to be a big year. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, but I'm optimistic about now recognizing the problem so that things can start to change, because there's still a little bit of time.
That is the
yeah,
first
yeah,
step. Clearly seeing.
Yeah.
yeah. We got the you've given us the diagnosis right now.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's multiple ways to approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate your time
You're
here.
Yeah.
welcome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, thanks for hanging in for this long conversation with Ryan. Everyone, take good care.